Chapter Renaissance. The first part of the modern age of Europe out of three, that's Renaissance. Let's see what we are going to cover in this chapter before we begin. It's a chapter from the world history section. The modern age of Europe chapters are divided into three parts. This is the first part, which is the Renaissance. And being from the world history section and later half of your textbook, picture study questions do come from this chapter. We'll be studying a total of 36 questions. Let's see what are these 36 questions, and the chapter is mainly divided into four parts. Your syllabus of the chapter is divided into four parts. Question numbers are written besides the answers. So if you want to directly skip to those answers, you can directly skip to those question numbers. As said before, when you study from video, you get an advantage of playing the video again. You get an advantage of fast forwarding the video, or you can play the video at a slower pace, whichever you are comfortable. Let's see, the syllabus of the chapter is mainly divided into four parts. The first one is the definition, question 1. Then we'll be covering the causes of Renaissance, question 2 to 12. There are 5 causes: printing press, decline of feudalism, capture of Constantinople, new trade routes, and spirit of inquiry. Then this chapter moves on to impact of Renaissance, mainly on art, literature, and science. Question numbers 13 to 30, where you'll be covering also some great people and some great artists like Da Vinci, Shakespeare, Copernicus. And finally, we have some additional questions and picture study, which are from question numbers 31 to 36. So a total of 36 questions, a world history chapter. Let's see question number 1, meaning and definition of Renaissance. Let's see the first question, what is meant by Renaissance? Answer is divided into 5 points with head point matter. First one, complex transitional movement in Europe. So the term Renaissance means rebirth or revival. It stands for a complex transitional movement in Europe between medieval and modern times, which began in the 14th century in Italy and lasting into the 17th century. So it means rebirth or revival. It was a transition from medieval times to modern times, 14th century lasting into the 17th century in Italy. Point number 2, freedom to think and act. It marked the revival of freedom to think and act without being controlled by any external agency, and hence it began the starting of the modern era, or it marked the beginning of the modern era. So second point says you are free to think, you're free to act, there is no external agency controlling you. Modern era has started, in which subjects, basically practically all subjects, literature, philosophy, art, politics, science, religion, and other aspects of intellectual inquiry. Point number 4, Greek and Roman classics. It was also the revival of the study of the ancient Greek and Roman classics. And fifth one and the final one, remarkable changes took place in Europe during this period. Many remarkable changes took place in Europe, which had their impact on history of the world. Because you are free to think, revival and rebirth is happening. So remarkable changes have taken place, mainly in Europe. Why? Because it started in Italy. And as a result, one of them was the disintegration of the feudal system in Europe. We're going to learn about the feudal system in detail. But Renaissance broke down the feudal system. The entire system which was on in Europe broke down because of Renaissance. and this ushered a new and social economic order. This breaking down of the feudal system begins a new social and economic order, and it was mainly in Europe. Moving to causes of Renaissance, question numbers 2 to 12. We'll be studying the following causes, each in detail from short as well as long answer point of view. Invention of the printing press, decline of feudalism, capture of Constantinople, new trade routes, and the spirit of inquiry. Let's see causes of Renaissance, question 2 onwards. First cause, invention of the printing press. Question number 3, explain how invention of the printing press led to rise of Renaissance or a new awakening in Europe. 7 points, again head point matter. First one, set up in Germany, then in England. The first printing press was set up in Germany by the Gutenberg in the middle of the 15th century. Later on, by Caxton, introduced it in England. These were the two individuals who had introduced the printing press. Germany में Gutenberg and Caxton in England. Point number 2, produce books in large numbers. Now the fact that there was a printing press, books could be produced in large numbers. In the Middle Ages, books were few and they were beyond the reach of the ordinary people. The invention of the printing press in the middle of the 15th century in Europe made it possible to produce books in large numbers. Point number 3, Bible and many other religious books. The Bible and the many other religious books were the first made available all over Europe. So these were the books which first got printed, Bible and many other religious classics. Continuing, point number 4, what was the advantage of the printing press? Fourth one, simple, spread knowledge. The printing press spread knowledge far and wide. Easier to read printed books, as you have currently on the screen, your textbooks are printed. So it was easier to read printed books as compared to handwritten manuscripts. Multiply books, the printing press enabled to multiply books and put them within the reach of the people. And finally, influenced people's attitude to life. Printing and distribution of books influenced people's attitude to life and brought them a new awakening in Europe, thus leading to Renaissance. Moving to the second cause, decline of feudalism. A very, very, very important answer seen in maximum of the papers, a short one. Let's see the meaning of feudalism. Feudalism was a system according to which the medieval European society was organized on the basis of land tenure. So the entire medieval European society was organized and it was basis for which was the land tenure. Second one, that is from the king to the smallest landlord through a series of defense and obligation. In this system, the society functioned through the means of land tenure. So at that time, land was very important, by which everybody was bound, from the king to the smallest landowner, through a series of defense and obligation which they had. Let's see how does the system work. Point number 3. The kings, dukes, earls, and barons. The king used to give estates to his lords. The king is transferring his estates to his lords, who are known as the dukes and earls. These lords distributed a part of their landholding to lesser lords or barons. So from level 1 to level 2 to barons, that is lesser lords, who provided them with military support. Here I've given you a flow chart for simple reference. King is giving his estates to lords. These lords are called as dukes and earls. Dukes and earls gave a part of their land to barons. Barons who were lesser lords in return gave military support. Simple flow chart for remembrance. Point number 4, owned allegiance. The dukes and earls owned allegiance directly to the king, so the dukes and earls were directly responsible to the king, whereas the barons owned allegiance to the dukes and earls, so the barons are directly responsible to the dukes and earls. Knights formed the lower category. The knights formed the lower category of feudal lords. The feudal lords did not cultivate their own land and gave it to peasants for cultivation. So then came a category of knights who were lower category feudal lords. They did not cultivate their land on their own and they gave it to the peasants for cultivation. This was the entire feudal system, how it was. And eventually this feudal system declined and it was mainly based on land tenure. Now, what were the effects of this feudal system? Point number 6, social mobility and progress. The society had a graded organization in which there was hardly any chance of social mobility and progress. So to climb up the order, it was not easy. You couldn't change your position so easily. You couldn't change your financial conditions so easily. Why? Because the main problem or the main thing on which the system was based was land tenure. And to get land was not that easy, or to own land was not that easy, because all land was basically owned by the king. So there was hardly any chance of social mobility and progress. Point number 7, it was also opposed to freedom and equality of rights. And lastly, impetus to free thinking. However, the decline of the feudal system in the 13th and the 14th century provided an impetus to free thinking. Impetus means an opening. The place and the peace and the freedom that prevailed after the decline of the feudalism favored the growth of new learning. It led to the new developments in the spheres, that is, in the subjects of art, literature, philosophy, and science, and contributed to the rise of Renaissance. This was your cause number 2, decline of the feudal system or decline of feudalism. Moving to cause number 3, capture of the Constantinople. Three simple points. How did Constantinople's capture lead to a cause of Renaissance or rise of Renaissance? First one, center of Greek and Roman cultures. Constantinople was the capital of Eastern Roman Empire, and it was the center of Greek and Roman cultures. It had valuable manuscripts of Greek and Roman culture and writings. Point number 2, Greek and Roman scholars were forced to shift. That is, after the Constantinople fell into the hands of the Turks in 1453, many Greek and Roman scholars were thus forced to shift to Rome. So you had to leave Constantinople and they were asked to shift to Rome and other parts of Europe with their manuscripts. Hence, now Rome then became the center of the Greek culture. So, from Constantinople, everybody shifted to different parts and mainly to Rome also. Hence, Rome became the center of the Greek culture once Constantinople, which was the capital of Eastern Europe, fell into the hands of the Turks. Third one, they revived the interest of the people in Greek philosophy, science, art, and literature. These scholars were geniuses, men of liberal outlook. humanism, and logical thinking. Keywords: geniuses, men of liberal outlook, humanism, and logical thinking. Wherever they went, they spread their new ideas and spirit. In this way, they revived the interest of the people in the study of Greek, philosophy, science, art, and literature. And the revival of learning of Greek classics paved the way for Renaissance. Hence, Constantinople falls, they move out of Constantinople, and these scholars are geniuses, men of liberal outlook, humanism, and logical thinking. They revived the interest of people in these subjects. Hence, wherever they went, they spread education, light, and knowledge, and they gave the way for Renaissance. Sixth one, new trade routes. How did new trade routes, the discovery of new trade routes, play a role in the rise of Renaissance? Navigators of Portugal and Spain. The navigators of Portugal and Spain played an important role in geographical explorations and discovering of the new trade routes. We did this before. Constantinople fell in the hands of the Turks in 1453, and the trade routes between the west and the east were closed. As a result, European traders and navigators felt the need of discovering the new trade routes. These are 5 examples of new discovery and new trade routes. First one, Prince Henry, the navigator of Portugal, discovered a sea route to Africa. Second one, Bartholomew Dias was successful in reaching Cape of Good Hope, which was the southernmost point of Africa. Vasco da Gama sailed as far as India, 1498, and Ferdinand Magellan made a voyage around the world and reached the vast ocean which he called as the Pacific Ocean. So 5 examples of discovery of new trade route. New trade routes advantages can come as a separate answer. Advantages of discovery of these new trade routes. Number one, fusion of ideas. Due to these discoveries, contact between the East and the West began to develop, and there was a fusion of ideas. Spirit of adventure and broaden the mental horizon. The opening of new trade routes not only encouraged the trade, but also the spirit of adventure and broaden the mental horizon. Cause number 5, how did spirit of inquiry lead to the rise of Renaissance? Question number 8. First point, authority of the Pope and the Church. In the medieval period, all human activities, be mental or physical, were controlled and guided by the authority of the Pope and the Church. The humans were virtually not allowed to develop independent thinking. So everything due before the Renaissance was controlled by the Pope and the Church, including your mental and physical activities. Point number 2, why and how things changed. But a number of scholars discarded the ideas of medieval period and developed the spirit of inquiry. These scholars started questioning things and developed a spirit of inquiry and a sense of curiosity among the people. They taught human beings to know the why and how of things. Why did certain things happen on planet Earth? How did they happen? And you were made to ask such questions. Point number 3, transition from faith to reason. They did not regard anything as correct merely because the theologies of the church had regarded it correct. They questioned the authority of the church. They wanted transition from faith to reason and observation and experimentation. Hence, 3 points. How did the spirit of inquiry give rise to Renaissance? Here, question number 9. The following were factors that were responsible for the development of spirit of inquiry: crusades, development of science, and role of original thinkers. Let's do each of them in detail. First one, crusades. What role did crusades play in ushering spirit of inquiry? 3 points once again. Religious expeditionary wars. The crusades were the religious expeditionary wars with the goal of restoring the church's access to holy places in and near Jerusalem. So the Crusades were religious wars, religious expeditionary wars. What was the main aim of Crusades? To restore the power of the church, restore the church's access to places in and near Jerusalem. People of Europe into direct contact with Asia. They brought the people of Europe into direct contact with Asia. Crusades brought The Crusades brought to Western Europe ideas from the East. And lastly, it destroyed dogmatic attitude. It widened your outlook of life, and it destroyed dogmatic attitude. People began to rely on reason rather than just blind faith. The meaning of dogmatic means to follow rules and regulations come what may. Basically, you're going to follow the rules and regulations come what may. That's what dogmatic means. That's what was destroyed. Dogmatic attitude was destroyed, and people started to rely on reason rather than faith. Question number 11, development of science. How did it create spirit of inquiry? 5 points. First one, students to observe things in nature. In the age of faith, science had little scope of development, but certain medieval scholars showed scientific attitude and asked their questions to observe things in nature. This brought about many inventions and discoveries. It was basically, as we said, a renaissance for revival and rebirth. People started to ask questions. So now faith is taking backseat and science is going to develop. Point number 2, broaden the mental outlook. Development of science created spirit of inquiry and scientific temper. These inventions broadened the people's outlook and put an end to old beliefs and traditions. 3 examples once again. Roger Bacon contemplated the use of horseless carriages and flying machines. Copernicus proved that the earth moves around the sun, and Galileo invented the telescope. These were the developments in science which occurred as a spirit of inquiry because faith took backseat and science temper grew and people started to observe things and ask questions and new discoveries came into the picture. Last one, role of original thinkers. How did the roles of original thinkers promote the spirit of inquiry among the people? 3 points. First one, faith in the church dogmas. During the medieval age, church discouraged original thinking and called upon scholars to put their faith in the church dogmas. Second one, original thinking could not be suppressed. However, original thinking could not be suppressed for a long time, and certain bold and independent thinkers criticized the church and asked the people to develop their own thinking. So the first 2 points are opposite of each other. Church is saying to follow the church dogmas. Dogmas means following the rules and regulations and beliefs without questioning. But this was not possible. It was criticized by original thinkers. And finally, revolution forerunners of the Renaissance. These were revolutionaries. What is their names? Roger Bacon, Abelard, Thomas Aquinas, these were revolutionaries who brought the change and they laid stress on reasoning. These original thinkers were called as the forerunners of Renaissance. This brings us to the end of the first part of the chapter, that is causes of Renaissance. Moving to the next part of the chapter, impact of Renaissance. This is the second part of the chapter. Impact is from question numbers 13 to 30. You'll be studying impact under three categories: impact on art, literature, and science, and renowned personalities in each department: Da Vinci, Shakespeare, and Copernicus. Let's see impact on art, 14 to 17 question numbers, including studying Leonardo da Vinci. Let's see question number 13, impact. What aspects of life did Renaissance have an impact on? The aspects of life Renaissance had an impact on were art, literature, philosophy, science, religion. It was due to the spirit of Renaissance that the significant traits emerged in the realm of thought, art, and literature. Moving to impact of Renaissance on art, or they can ask you what changes occurred in the style of painting as a result of Renaissance, that is, as a result of the Renaissance spirit in Europe. 3 points. Let's see these in detail. First one, impact of Renaissance in the field of art, tool for propagating religion. During the medieval times, the paintings and sculptures served as a tool for propagating religion. Even the colors which the painters used were strictly regulated. So all the paintings, all the sculptures were only and only used for propagating religion, including the painters using their colors, which were strictly regulated. You were not free to use any color which you liked. You had to take permission from the church or higher authorities. Point number 2, frescoes, oil colors, and woodcuts. However, the artists of the Renaissance period refused to abide by the medieval rules. They adopted new artistic methods such as frescoes for wall pictures, oil colors, and woodcuts. So frescoes means drawing on the wall or on the ceilings. So this was something new which was adopted. Oil colors were started to be used. Woodcuts were used. So these were the changes which took place in art due to Renaissance. And last point, geometry and human anatomy. They studied optics and geometry to use their knowledge to develop perspective in paintings. They also studied human anatomy to find the mechanism underlying gestures and expressions. So this much effort was put because of Renaissance, that they studied geometry so that their paintings look very realistic, angles are correct. They studied human anatomy in order to know the movement, the expressions, the gestures, in order to make their paintings again look very realistic. And this was the level of effort which was put as an impact of Renaissance. Moving to paintings, question number 15, mention the impact of Renaissance on paintings. The previous questions were mentioned the impact of Renaissance in the field of art. Now we are specifically speaking about paintings. First point shows their talent without being restricted. The Renaissance painters were established very high standards and produced some of the greatest paintings of time. They were able to show their talent without being restricted by the rigid rules of the church. Because of their high talent, they produced lifelike paintings. They had a humanistic secular approach and produced high artistic and lifelike paintings. Their paintings look real. Today, also, we have a lot of masterpieces done by them. We're going to study them in the coming pages. So, their paintings were lifelike. They had a humanistic secular approach towards paintings. Moving to question number 16, it's a reference question. Renaissance artists tried to depict the life on canvas and stone. With reference to this statement, describe the art of painting. Renaissance artists tried to depict life on canvas and stone. Now, this answer is a combination of questions number 15 plus 14. That is 14 and 15 combination is nothing but answer number 16. You have already done this. We spoke about frescoes, oil colors, and woodcuts in the above point. That the painters and artists did not abide by the traditions and adopted new artistic methods like frescoes for wall pictures, oil colors, and woodcuts. And the second point is also from the answer number 14 and 15. They studied geometry, they studied human anatomy in order to understand and make their paintings highly artistic and lifelike, and humanistic secular approach was there in their paintings. These points and these keywords are already repeated in question numbers 14 and 15. Moving to a very important answer. This has featured in many papers. It's a short answer, including picture study. Leonardo da Vinci. Question number 17, very simple. Write a short note on Da Vinci. We'll be going through all the points because they may ask you specific points for 2 marks as well. There are 8 points in total. Let's see the first one. Painter, sculptor, musician, and artist. You will have to learn all 8. They can ask you specific points in 2 mark sections or as a short answer. Da Vinci was a great painter, sculptor, musician, and artist. Second one, Andrea del Verrocchio. Da Vinci received no formal education beyond reading, writing, and maths, but his father appreciated his artistic talent and apprenticed him at around age 15 to the noted sculptor and painter Andrea del Verrocchio of Florence. So what does it mean? He obviously received no formal education beyond reading, writing, and maths, but his father understood that he has a lot of talent in art. As a result, he sent him to Andrea del Verrocchio to learn. Apprentice means sending someone to learn from a skilled person. That person is skilled. So here, del Verrocchio was skilled. He was he was a painter and sculptor of Florence, and Da Vinci in his early years, around the age of 15, learned sculpturing and painting from del Verrocchio. Third one, painting and sculpting techniques. For about a decade, that is around 10 years, Da Vinci refined his painting and sculpting techniques and trained in mechanical arts. Point number 4, nature, mechanics, weaponry, etc. Da Vinci's interest ranged from beyond fine arts as well. He studied nature, mechanics, anatomy, physics, architecture, and weaponry as well. So not only art and sculpting, but also other fields he studied like nature, mechanics, anatomy, physics, architecture, and weaponry. Fifth point, science and art are complementary. Da Vinci saw science and art are complementary rather than different disciplines. and thought that ideas formulated in one realm, that is, in one subject, should be and could be used in the other subject. So you can do science, you can use science to do art, and vice versa. You can use art to learn science. Writing about his observations, sixth one, he spent a great deal of time immersing himself in nature, testing scientific laws, dissecting bodies of humans and animals, and thinking and writing about his observations. Seventh one, last two, creating thousands of pages of neatly drawn illustrations. At some point in the early 1490s, Da Vinci began filling notebooks related to four broad themes, which are painting, architecture, mechanics, and human anatomy. So he started filling books, 1490, which were the four broad themes: painting, architecture, mechanics, and human anatomy, creating thousands of pages of neatly drawn illustrations. Last one, again, some examples, very important, can ask, this can come in fill in the blanks also. Virgin of the Rocks and The Last Supper and the Mona Lisa. These are his paintings. Obviously, these are his famous works. His paintings, Virgin of the Rocks, Last Supper, and the Mona Lisa are great masterpieces of art. New techniques were adopted in these paintings to give a fine feeling of reality. So these were the 8 points of Da Vinci. Da Vinci, a very important answer. You will have to learn everything, 8 points. Specific points can come as short answer or a combined question for a long answer, as you know. And this is Da Vinci picture study in case they ask you to identify Da Vinci and then give his works or his contributions in the field of art. Moving to the next one, impact of Renaissance on literature, under which we'll be covering Italy, England, and contributions by William Shakespeare. One question for each, 18 to 21. Progress. Let's see impact on literature of Renaissance. Question number 18, English literature, 2 points. First one, use of local languages. The most significant impact of Renaissance on literature was the use of local languages. Renaissance allowed to write and spread knowledge as well as books in local languages instead of Latin as in the Middle Ages. Point number 2, man and his problems. Man and his problems. Besides, there was a change of themes in the writing work. Earlier writers dwelt on spiritual themes, including heaven. Now, after Renaissance, that is during Renaissance, however, the authors wrote on man and his problems. That is, we are here speaking about society and their problems and how the society was there, how the society was divided, difference between rich and poor, and so on and so forth. So it's not only spiritual, including heaven. That is not only good stuff, but now we are also discussing and putting light on the problems which are there in the society. That's what they mean by man and his problems. Third point, a number of English poets and dramatists of repute were produced in England. Some of the English writers of Renaissance period were these people: Geoffrey Chaucer, Thomas More, Francis Bacon, and William Shakespeare. Moving to literature in England, here we'll speak about four works and their authors and their writers. First one, Machiavelli. He was a great political writer of Italy. He expressed his political ideas in his work, The Prince. Very important, Machiavelli wrote The Prince. We are speaking about Italy. Second one, Dante. Dante's Divine Comedy is an epic poem on the state of the soul. It reveals the religious and social life of the day. Again, here after Machiavelli, the work was Prince. Here we have Dante, Dante's Divine Comedy. Third one, Petrarch. Petrarch was a great scholar and writer. He has been called the father of humanism. His sonnets and lyrics were popular throughout Europe. Petrarch, father of humanism. And lastly, Aristo, Tasso, and Boccaccio. Other Italian writers were Aristo, Tasso, and Boccaccio. Boccaccio wrote in prose. His work Decameron is a collection of 100 famous short stories. This is literature in Italy 4 with names and authors. Moving to literature in England. Here we have 5 of them. First one, father of English poetry. England produced a number of writers, poets, and dramatists of repute. Geoffrey Chaucer heralded the Renaissance literature in England. Herald means predicted the change. He said it will come. He also initiated the change. He is regarded as the father of English poetry. The Canterbury Tales is his outstanding work. So, who is the father of English poetry? Geoffrey Chaucer. Renaissance literature in England was heralded by him. His famous work, Canterbury Tales. Second one, Thomas More wrote Utopia, describing an imaginary island in England where the rich did not exploit the poor. There, the society had no blind faith and it did not believe in useless wars. Thomas More, Utopia, Imaginary Island in America. That's what his story was based on. Third one, Francis Bacon, William Shakespeare, and Ben Jonson. Other famous English writers in this period were these three. Francis Bacon was an essay writer. Shakespeare, Ben Jonson, and Marlowe were well known dramatists. Milton, Paradise Lost, is an immoral work of Milton, and Edwin Spenser wrote the poem Fair Queen. Fair Queen. These were 5 of them from literature in England and their works. Moving to contribution of William Shakespeare, that is in literature field, very, very important. William Shakespeare, a very short question featured in many question papers of grade 9. Let's see what does it say. William Shakespeare, question number 21. Write a short note on William Shakespeare, who was the famous English poet and dramatist in the 16th century. They can give you the picture study also of William Shakespeare. Here we have 7 points. Let's see the first one. First one, English poet, playwright, and actor. He was an English poet, playwright, and actor who is regarded as the greatest writer in English language and the world's preeminent dramatist. Bard of Avon, he is often called England's national poet and Bard of Avon. So 2 names, England's national poet and Bard of Avon. Bard means a person who writes poems, and Avon was the place where he was from in England. That's why a person who writes poems from England, that's why he was called Bard of Avon. 38 plays, 154 sonnets, and 2 long narrative poems, and few other verses were his works in total. With the exception of Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare's plays, cancel this. Shakespeare's plays were mostly historical dramas. Richard II, Henry IV, Henry V, they were all historical dramas. Romeo and Juliet was not an historical drama. Several comedies. He wrote several comedies during his early period. During his early time in career, he wrote several comedies. A Midnight, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Much Ado About Nothing, As You Like It, and The 12th Night. So these 2 points speak about his works, historical works, as well as comedies which he wrote. Hamlet, King Lear, Othello, Macbeth. It was only after the 16th century that he wrote tragedies like Hamlet, King Lear, Othello, and Macbeth. So historical dramas, several comedies, and after the 16th century, he started writing tragedies. Lastly, last point, culture and history. Shakespeare's works transcends the culture and history. He appeals to emotions and thoughts that are a part of eternal human nature and therefore have a universal appeal. So his works speak about culture, his work speaks about the history, his works also speaks about the society of that time, his and thoughts that are a part of eternal human nature, that is human psychology. It speaks about human thoughts which were same during those periods as well as today. So that's why his writings and his work have a universal appeal. Mention the impact of Renaissance on science. Supported by authority, the Renaissance marked the beginning of modern science. Earlier, it was held that all views, even on science, are to be supported by the authority of the scriptures. Basically, no scientific evidence or no scientific experiment could be conducted without the support of the authority of the scriptures. However, point number 2, scientists of this period believe that all views on science should be based on observation and experimentations. That's your head point. The method of inquiry, questioning, observation, experimentation, that is enthusiasm increased to ask why things are happening and how things are happening, which are used even today in scientific investigations. So basically, in Renaissance, earlier you had to have the support of the authorities of the scriptures, that is, you have to take a permission from the churches with respect to scientific experiments or observations, that whether these experiments can be conducted and these observations can be put down on paper. But after Renaissance, that is modern science came into the picture, where everything, just like today, is based on observation and experimentation, inquiry, questioning, and so on. Let's see again an important contribution. Just like you had in the field, different fields, we did Shakespeare. Here we are doing a very important scientist once again, Nicholas Copernicus, a very important short question. 6 points. First one, mathematician and astronomer. He was a mathematician and astronomer. He formulated the model of the universe and placed the sun rather than the earth in the center of the universe. So up till that time, people believed the earth was the center of the universe. He said, no, earth is not. It is the sun. on revolutions of the celestial spheres. The publication of this model in his book. So he published this model saying that the center of the universe is the sun. In his book, the Revolutionibus Orbium Celestial. In English, it is on the revolutions and the of the celestial spheres. Just before his death in 1543, when the book was published, is regarded as a major event in the history of science. And this publicly putting down that the sun is the center of the universe triggered a Copernican revolution. Very important, once again, his book on the revolutions of the celestial spheres, De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium. Copernicus based his heliocentric theory on the following. Let's see what is the heliocentric theory and was it based on? What did Copernicus say about it? 4 points. There is no one center of all celestial circles or spheres. Mark the head point, no one center. Fourth one, the center of the earth is not the center of the universe, but only of gravity and of the lunar sphere. Basically, the center of the earth is not the center of the universe. The center of the universe is the sun. That's what it said here. All the spheres revolve around the sun and their midpoint, and therefore the sun is the center of the universe. And lastly, the earth has more than one motion, which you've already learned, revolution and rotation, that is turning on its axis and moving around a spherical orbit around the sun. That is revolution and rotation. This is the Copernicus based his heliocentric theory on the following. This is what he spoke in his heliocentric theory. Heliocentric is that theory which speaks about sun being in the center. So these all points spoke about sun being in the center of the universe. That's what is heliocentric theory of Copernicus. This triggered a lot of change in science after this was published. 24 mention the discoveries made by other scientists. Now we're going to study German scientist John Kepler during the Renaissance period. German scientist John Kepler proved that the Earth and other planets move around the Sun, not in a circle but in an elliptical orbit. The German scientist John Kepler said the Earth and other celestial bodies move not in a circle but an elliptical orbit. During Renaissance period, scientist Galileo invented the telescope. Sir Isaac Newton discovered the law of gravity, that is gravitation. Obviously, before we go ahead, you just need to know this is Nicolaus Copernicus. In order for picture study and his heliocentric theory, they can ask you, or his contributions to science. Other discoveries in the medical field were in medical sciences. Basilius wrote a treatise on anatomy. Treatise is a formal paper. William Harvey, an English physician, discovered the circulation of the blood from the heart to all the parts of the body and back to the heart. Paracelsus proved a close connection between medicine and chemistry. Claudius prepared ether from alcohol and sulfuric acid. Helmont discovered CO2. Discovery made by the Arabs during the Renaissance period. Arabs gave algebra and numerals to the West. Last two, modern geometry was made systematic by Desargues, and Stephen advocated the decimal system of coins, weights, and measures. This completes your impact of entirely of Renaissance, including impact on science. Moving to the last part of the chapter, additional questions and picture study. Question 31. Why did the Renaissance began in Italy? Give two reasons. Why did the Renaissance begin in Italy? First one, seat of the glorious Roman Empire. Italy was the seat of the glorious Roman Empire, and all historical remains and relics of Romans were found there. So a lot of history was there. This attracted a number of scholars and artisans. Wealth accumulated as a result of trade, a lot of wealth, enormous wealth which Italy had accumulated as a result of trade with the East also contributed to the rise of Renaissance. So Italy at that time was a very, very, very wealthy state. The wealthy merchants of Italy patronized the artists and literary figures and used their wealth for the revival of the classic literatures and culture. So, what does the second point say? These wealthy merchants of Italy patronized the artists and literary figures. They used their wealth for the revival of classic culture and literature. So, Italy was very wealthy due to the trade in the East. As a result, this money was used for revival of classic culture, literature, artists, literary figures. Basically, in simple words, Italy was the nerve center, Italy was the hub. So the movement started from there. Mention two outstanding features of Renaissance art. We have done this a little before also. First one, David and Pieta, the remarkable statues of bronze examples of David by Donatello and Pieta by Michelangelo. So that's the first one. Second feature, bronze doors. Lorenzo G, that is Lorenzo Gebretti in Italy, made two pairs of bronze doors for baptistery at Florence. Two artworks of Renaissance. Who wrote the Canterbury Tales? Geoffrey Chaucer wrote the Canterbury Tales. Who was the first to sail across the Atlantic Ocean? Christopher Columbus was the first to sail across the Atlantic Ocean. Name two important effects of Renaissance. First one, Renaissance led to the Reformation movement. That's my next chapter, Reformation, and great outflow of vernacular literature. And lastly, picture study, one picture study. More than one can come. You've already done Copernicus, you've already done William Shakespeare picture studies. This is also one which is a famous one. Identify the painting and name the artist, name some other works of his. The given painting is The Last Supper, a very famous painting, Last Supper by Da Vinci. You've done Da Vinci's also picture study, Leonardo da Vinci. Other paintings famous by him is obviously the Mona Lisa, which was also there in the above pictures. This brings us to the end of the Renaissance chapter.